Before we begin, this video is based on our understanding of Nioh's story and lore, and reflects our interpretation of its events as a refresher before Nioh 3. As always, we recommend that you make your own informed call by looking into the game yourself and ensuring that it matches your expectations, standards, and personal values. So with that out of the way, let's begin. Feudal Japan stories, especially in video games, often tend to fall into some familiar periods, the Bakumatsu period being particularly popular. However, before the fall of the Tokugawa Shogunate, leading into the Meiji Restoration, was the era leading up to its formation, where samurai and ninja roamed the battlefields as legendary figures clashed. That's right, the late Sengoku era, which forms a fitting backdrop for Team Ninja's Nioh series. Now, the house that Ninja Gaiden and Dead or Alive built is no stranger to dark fantasy, but its hack and slash efforts have been of the fast-paced variety. Before Nioh, it never really tussled with Souls-like mechanics, and anyway, how would that even work? How would the combo-heavy gameplay mesh with a stamina meter and switchable stances for each weapon? Well, as it turns out, quite well. Launched in 2017 for the PS4 and later that year for PC, Nioh received significant critical acclaim for its setting, gameplay, and difficulty. It even went on to ship more than 1 million units worldwide in the first 2 weeks. Not bad for a new IP, and certainly a morale booster for the studio after the abysmal Ninja Gaiden 3. With Nioh 3 launching on February 6th, arriving 9 years after the first game, it's worth diving into the world of Nioh and asking the most important question. What the heck actually happened in Nioh 1? Contrary to what you would expect, it all begins in London, 1598, the latter years of the Anglo-Spanish War. Originally tasked by Queen Elizabeth I to find a mysterious substance called Amrita in Japan, William Adams instead finds himself imprisoned in the Tower of London. Not wanting to remain a permanent guest, he escapes with the help of Saoirse. Based on the Marrow, equivalent to mermaid in Irish folklore, which fits with the real-world William's occupation as a navigator, she's been our hero since he was a child. It's one of the reasons he's lived for so long, defying death. Despite the escape attempt going swimmingly, and I'm not going to say how many times I died if you won't, Williams crosses paths with the mysterious Edward Kelly after defeating Derek the Executioner. Kelly wants the Amrita for his own nefarious purposes and showcases exactly what they're capable of, corrupting Derek's corpse and initiating Phase 2 of the fight. William emerges victorious thanks to Saoirse's living weapon attack, but loses her to Kelly, who then disappears. Following his own harrowing escape, the plan is set. Investigate the Amrita for the sake of Queen and country. Recover Saoirse from Kelly, and maybe give him a proper thrashing in response. This leads to a voyage with 3 other accompanying ships, and though the others don't make it, William acknowledges that his own is far from lucky, since the only thing that awaits them in Japan is monsters and death. You see, because of the long-standing strife and the war of the late Sengoku era, yokai have begun to emerge and wreak havoc on the unsuspecting populace. William goes up against an Oni and just manages to defeat it before meeting up with Hattori Hanzo, an Iga shinobi aligned with Tokugawa Ieyasu. He also meets Nekomata, providing details on Japan, the various factions, and much more, including translation. As William works with Ieyasu, we learn more about the latter's opposition, Ishida Mitsunari. To attain his own vision of a unified Japan, he allies with Edward Kelly. Other notable allies include Tachibana Ginshio, master of the Raikiri, who teams up with William to find her husband, Munashige. There's also Okatsu, a kunoichi of the Hitari, who warms up to William despite her initial distrust, and who's the daughter of Ieyasu, and Tenkai, a mysterious monk. William undertakes more missions under Ieyasu, barely missing Kelly throughout. Not only does the latter revive Nohime, the late Oda Nobunaga's wife, into a Yukiona, but he also causes a crisis in Kyoto, weakening a seal to unleash yokai, which leads to Nekomata sacrificing itself so that William and Tenkai can mend it. Kelly even mind controls Okatsu, though she's saved by William. All these events, the intrigue and hostilities between Ieyasu and Mitsunari, ultimately lead to the Battle of Sekigahara. A bloody conflict, and in the midst of it, William fights off Otani Yoshitsugu and Shima Sakon, Mitsunari's allies. Ieyasu and his army gain the advantage, though Mitsunari tries to fight back, allowing Kelly to create a Gashadokuru, read a massive, malevolent skeleton, by sacrificing hundreds of his soldiers. Together with Hanzo and Tenkai, William ultimately defeats it before battling Mitsunari, or rather a corrupted version of him twisted into a yokai by Kelly's machinations. With his defeat, William restores his humanity, though Ieyasu's forces quickly take him prisoner. It's around this point that we learn more about Tenkai and his real identity as Akechi Mitsuhide. Back when Nobunaga ruled the land, Mitsuhide betrayed him, leaving him to die in a blaze. Initially thought dead, he changed his name and ultimately supported Ieyasu's vision for the country. Back in the present day, William eventually corners Kelly, but the latter enacts his real plan, reviving Oda Nobunaga. First, he needs to contend with Nobunaga's former vassal, Yosuke, but it's too late. Nobunaga has returned, and promptly breaks free from Kelly because, well, he's Oda freaking Nobunaga. He subsequently departs, though he isn't forgotten, appearing in a post-game mission and a challenging duo boss alongside the Yuki-onna, and it's just Kelly and William. With nowhere else to run, Kelly brings the mythical Yamata no Orochi to the forefront to defeat William. He fails, naturally, and upon recovering Saoirse, Kelly is revealed as just a lackey. The true mastermind, the one who tasked him with gathering Amrita, well, he's actually back in England. With Kelly dead, Hanzo reveals that he's under orders to kill William by Ieyasu to ensure that the secret of Amrita does not get out. William is aware of this, but instead, Hanzo lets his friend go, choosing to report him as dead, allowing him to leave Japan and return to England. The journey takes about 3 years, and by the time William arrives, Queen Elizabeth I is announced to have passed away. Furthermore, her advisor, John Dee, who was the mastermind behind Kelly's mission, has taken control. Infiltrating the Tower of London, William eventually meets with Dee. As it turns out, he discovered the power of Amrita long ago, and how it's used to create yokai from humans, which he then employed during naval combat against the Spanish Empire, even if it ultimately resulted in the transformed soldiers dying out. While scouring the world for Amrita, the conflict in Japan proved particularly enticing for Dee. If the war continued, then it could be used as a steady source for the substance. He now believes that with its power he can conquer England and eventually the world, and urges William to join his cause. Not being completely out of his mind and having developed a taste for smacking down tyrants, William refuses and proceeds to fight Dee. Despite the latter using the Amrita gathered to transform into the 100 Eyes, he is defeated and subsequently blinded. You would think this to be a happy ending for William, but alas, that just isn't the case. Following his departure, Ieyasu executed Mitsunari, became the first shogun, and heralded the beginning of the Edo period. And why did the country at large hear nothing about yokai or the contributions of one William Adams in making it all possible? Well, because Ieyasu concealed all of this, and he's also aware that William is alive. Of course, Ieyasu has other problems to deal with, namely Toyotomi Hideyori. The leader of the Toyotomi clan, who lost much of his land after the Battle of Sekigahara, he was commanded to ally with Ieyasu, but ultimately refused. He would eventually lead a rebellion with the help of Sanada Yukimura, but there's another figure seemingly pulling the strings behind the scenes. As for Williams, he returns to Japan in the Dragon of the North DLC after witnessing a vision through the 100 Eyes of Hanzo's death. Upon reuniting with Ieyasu, he learns that Date Masamune, who was seemingly an ally after Sekigahara, is plotting to overthrow the shogun using yokai. Hanzo was sent to investigate but went missing. William thus embarks on a mission to save him, defeating Date Shigezane, a general in the family and Masamune's close friend in the process. However, the real pusher for Masamune's plan is Maria, who was seemingly his attendant. As a spy for the Spanish Empire, she supplied Masamune with Amrita, seeking to leverage its power and ultimately restore its glory. Upon Masamune's fall, she escapes and approaches Hideyori. This leads to the second DLC, Defiant Honor, which takes place in winter during the Siege of Osaka. Ieyasu's army battles against Yukimura's, with William coming to blows against the latter. Despite emerging victorious and Yukimura offering up his head as a trophy, the two are interrupted by Maria. Suddenly, Yodogimi, Hideyori's mother, has called for peace. In the midst of this, Hanzo is busy fighting against Sarutobi Sasuke, Yukimura's shinobi and close ally, who manages to retreat. As William and Yukimura look up at her on the castle balcony, she comments on how the latter's victory would be certain if they had the power of the Amrita. She looks upon her son, eyes glowing yellow, which leads to the third and final DLC, Bloodshed's End. Set several months later, it seems the call for peace did not last long, as the siege against Osaka Castle is still underway in the following summer. William battles Yukimura once more, and after defeating him, the latter admits that he can't follow Yodogimi anymore. Formerly childhood friends, her nature would change as she grew older. Despite staying loyal, he can no longer abide by her actions. After leaving Yukimura to his fate, William goes up against Hideyori, and though defeating him, he was never really alive to begin with. Instead, he was created by Yodogimi to serve as a clan head while she carried out her own plans. While William was busy, Hanzo returned to Ieyasu's camp and crossed blades against Yukimura, or so he thought. It actually turned out to be Sarutobi Sasuke, who assumed his master's identity to effectively fake his death. As for the real Yukimura, he ventured to Osaka Castle to join up with and fight alongside William. Together, the two battle through to Yodogimi, who's revealed to be possessed by an evil kitsune. Though emerging victorious, the castle is pretty much in ruins. William leaves to pursue Maria, who escaped once more, but Yukimura stays behind with Yodogimi, now free from the kitsune's influence, and they seemingly perish together. Hanzo and William gaze upon the fire engulfing Osaka Castle, the former commenting on how his work is done and it's time to protect the country from the shadows. Upon asking William what he'll do, he says that more will come in search of Amrita, which may mean another Spanish ninja. As they depart, a voiceover proclaims the beginning of the Ginna era in 1615, finally signaling the end of the bloodshed of the land. Maria remains at large, however, and her plans are far from over. At roughly 42 hours to complete the story for the base game and DLC, Nioh is a sweeping epic. Despite criticism surrounding its loot, namely the sheer amount, its acclaim is well warranted and still holds up after all of these years. That's especially the case for those with knowledge of the late Sengoku era and its key figures. The real-life William Adams, for example, went on to become a Hatamoto, aka a high-ranking advisor for Tokugawa. Despite being forbidden to leave for years, Adams ultimately remained in the country and passed away in 1620. That's not what becomes of Team Ninja's version of William, however. Who knows? We may just see him return sooner than later, but that is another story, one reserved for the sequel, Nioh 2.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.